approximately 83,000. There's often people saying there's 90,000 cesspools across the state because many that take effect decades in the future, a lot of times they're not taking into account how. Hey, what's happening, friends? Today we're going to talk about a topic that isn't super popular, and that is what happens to the stuff in your toilet when it goes down the drain, your wastewater. What happens to your wastewater, and what is the most important thing that you gotta consider as a Hawaii homeowner or Hawaii home buyer when it comes to your wastewater system? Because we have three different types of wastewater systems in Hawaii. The first one is what people commonly know as just a sewer, right? You're hooked up to a public sewer, it goes into that system, the government takes care of it, and everything is good to go. That's very common in the more developed and urban areas. And then there's two other private wastewater systems that we use in Hawaii, and one is a septic system, which again is very common and most people are very aware of, where it goes into a tank, it's treated in the tank, and then there's a leach field where the water is leached, and that does need to be pumped from time to time. And then the third type is a cesspool, which is basically just a hole in the ground. Your wastewater goes into it, it leaches into the ground, and sometimes it does need to be pumped, but a lot of times in our volcanic environment, the rock environment, it just leaches into the ground. And I've known people that have cesspools for many years, decades, and it's never needed to be pumped because it just naturally decomposes and leaches into the ground. But what's important for you to know as a Hawaii home buyer or home owner is that in 2025, all cesspools are mandated to be converted. So I'm going to tell you about this law and some specifics about it, and what most importantly you need to understand and prepare for, because it is a state law that is going to affect everybody, maybe, and I'll tell you exactly what I mean by that. So again, there's a law in the books the state legislature passed called Act 25, and it mandated that by 2050 all cesspools be converted to septic systems. And I'm going to explain exactly why that's easier said than done here in a second. So here's the basic legal framework. Like I said, Act 25 that was passed in 2017 is going to require that all cesspools be either converted to septic tanks or connected to a sewer by January 1st, 2025. And at the time, it banned any new cesspools from being constructed. So if you have a cesspool, you're good to go until 2050. But if you build a home today, you must sewer connect or have a septic system. And then it gave the State Department of Health state oversight over this regulatory framework. If you're looking to relocate here on the Big Island, I want to share with you a resource that we put together. Over 80 agents from my team, expert agents here on the Big Island, put together a relocation guide that will help you evaluate all of the important factors that you want to take into account before you move here to the Big Island. School districts, healthcare, employment, all of the things that you got to think about, we put into one home buyer's guide that will help you figure out what is best when you start this relocation process here to the Big Island. So if you want this guide, just click on the link below, fill out the form, we will send you the guide for free. And if you want to take the next steps and have a conversation with us, we'd be happy to help. And so the scope of the challenge, right, is that there are estimated to be approximately 83,000. There's often people saying there's 90,000 cesspools across the state because many of our rural communities do not have access to sewers, and it was much cheaper years past to build a cesspool than a septic system. And so many properties, and most of them are here on the Big Island. And so the state made a decision that this was bad for the environment and our groundwater. There's debate over whether or not that's true, but that we should no longer be using cesspools and we should all convert to septic systems. And that was the purpose and the intent of this law. But the reality of the situation, and again, when lawmakers make laws that take effect decades in the future, a lot of times they're not taking into account how actually practical it is to implement that law, and is it even going to be able to take effect when the time comes. And so if you just do some simple math, right, there are roughly 90,000 cesspools across the state. We have about 25 years left before this law mandates that they all be converted. We would need to convert about 3,000 cesspools a year in order to meet that 2050 goal. Currently, we do about 10% that, about 300, usually less than 300 a year are converted. And so we are way behind pace in terms of just doing the amount of construction necessary to convert cesspools into septic systems. And one of the challenges is obviously it's about $20,000 depending on where you are and how hard the rock is in the area that you live. But 20,000 is kind of an estimate based on the cost of converting a cesspool to a septic system. And if you look at it statewide and you do the math times the amount of cesspools, we're talking about $1.75 billion. So very, very expensive in order to do this. And right now, mostly the cost is burden is put on homeowners, and obviously a lot of people just don't have $20,000 lying around to do their septic system upgrade. And in addition to that, there's a bunch of challenges, right, to implement this. And the first one is workforce. Obviously, if we're only doing 300 and we need to do 3,000, we need 10 times more contractors and people who are able to do this work. So that's a very big problem. Site limitations are another one. We have built out neighborhoods with rock walls and retaining walls and fences and landscaping and all kinds of different things. And to get to a place where you could put in a septic system could be very, very difficult, if not impossible. And so that $20,000 cost that I just talked about could be significantly higher if you got to move a bunch of stuff and tear up driveways and do different things in order to actually install a septic system. So it's not always feasible or possible in many cases if you look at built up neighborhoods that have been there for 50 years. And then of course financial accessibility, like this is an issue, right? Just people having the money to do it. And then the equity and fairness of this, right, is definitely a problem, because if you live in a rural area and you're just a middle class working family that lives in that rural area because you don't have the means to live in a more urbanized built up area, that economic burden is going to fall on you higher, because if you live in an urbanized area and you're already connected to a sewer, you don't have to worry about this. Or if you needed to connect to a sewer, the infrastructure is there in order to do it. And so that's something that people have to weigh, is really this puts the cost burden of doing this on those that probably cannot afford it the most. And that's something that is definitely going to affect the ability for this to actually go into effect in the future. The most critical consideration for property owners in this whole entire thing is, I believe, this is my opinion, that this is going to be very hard to implement come 2050, and there's going to have to be some changes to the law as it stands, because they're not going to criminalize tens of thousands of people for not converting when the time comes. But what they can do today, and this is already happening, and this is what you need to realize if you're going to buy a home or you're planning on doing upgrades to your existing home, is for you to get a building permit today, you do need to upgrade your wastewater system if it affects the plumbing of the home. And so this is a big one, where if you want to add a bathroom or you want to add a additional dwelling unit that has a bathroom and a kitchen in it, that's gonna be affected by your wastewater system. So you may be required to upgrade your wastewater system before you can do any renovations to your home that require permits. And that's something that you really, really want to think about before making the decision to do upgrades or buying a home that may need upgrades. Is you could have that additional cost built in to it because of the need to upgrade your wastewater system. So again, I think there's going to have to be some legislative changes in the future. I do not think that as the law stands, it's going to be implementable in the future. That's something that you're going to have to base your decision making off of your risk tolerance. But we will see when the time comes what happens. But this is purely my opinion based on what's feasible today. And so as always, appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions, Dylan@buybigisland.com is my email address. There is a link in the description below to my calendar. You can book a meeting and we'll have a consultation. Always appreciate you guys watching. See you guys next week. Aloha.